A proposed museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is claiming that they're going to give you the inside scoop of what happened during the Civil War. They're going to right the wrongs of history, give you the correct record on the Civil War, and they don't care who they offend, who they upset. You must know the truth about the Civil War. So welcome back to the channel, Culture Confederacy here. It is early Saturday morning. Now, I normally post something Friday night, but it was a little noisy around my apartment. So I decided to do this on my downtime here at work, so pardon the camera angle. It is what it is. And if you're new to the channel, that's how we do the channel. So no fancy graphics, epic soundtracks, no pretty boy camera angles. Jumi, my smartphone, we talk about the news of the day, censorship, maybe a tinge of politics. But the premise is to protect this thing called free speech, to preserve great art, music, history, and culture, take down everything you disagree with. You're not going to have anything left to write or talk about, i.e. the Civil War. So this is a story by Jimmy Ryals, last name R-Y-A-L-S, and this came out February 24th. Again, over at the Assembly. It says here, Fayetteville Museum aims to write the record on Civil War history. The North Carolina History Center on the Civil War, Emancipation, and Reconstruction will use local stories to tell, quote-unquote, the truth with all its blemishes, even if it upsets some people. I just wonder who that or those some people could be. Who's that there some people be? Who be that people? Can you tell I'm having fun? So during the Civil War, North Carolina, let's get serious here. This is very serious. We're talking about the Civil War now. During the Civil War, North Carolina contributed more soldiers to the Confederate cause than any other state. North Carolina was also the next to last state to secede and was home to pro-union movements that persisted throughout the war. These are all facts, it says here, and they're part of the complex history the state is taking on in building the $87 million now, North Carolina History Center on the Civil War, Emancipation, and Reconstruction. Organizers say the Fayetteville Museum, which has been 2 decades in the making, will help North Carolina's educators teach a nuanced, factual story as unresolved racial and political divisions continue to cleave the country. Because you see, we got a lot of cleavage going on. A lot of cleavage out there in the United States. A lot of cleavage that we need to take care of. One thing the museum's backers are clear on, that story is about more than a war. It's a long, dark period in the state and nation's history, not a lost cause. Well, there was never a lost cause. There was no such thing as a lost cause. The History Center's job is to, quote-unquote, write the historical understanding because they are the knowing and all-seeing museum on the Civil War, Emancipation, and Reconstruction in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And the History Center's job is to write the historical understanding, as I said, of events between 1838 and 1898. This according to Michael McElrath, the Center's Education Initiatives Director. That's a lot of correcting. 1838 to 1898. I mean, you'd have to go year by year, month by month, day by day, minute by minute, second by second, millisecond by millisecond, to correct all the wrongs that happened from 1838 to 1898. Can we include Europe in that? Can we include what happened to, the Irish, the Chinese, the Italians, even some Germans to a certain extent? I mean, if we're really going to correct the record, we need to correct the record for everybody, right? Quote, and here's the bias. You'll see the bias. As they're claiming that they're going to give you an unblemished view or version of what happened, or they're going to tell you the real story, rather, of what happened during the Civil War. They let their bias out of the bag. That should be a t-shirt slogan. Don't let your bias out of the bag. Quote, the perspective that the war was really about arcane issues of constitutional balancing between the states and the federal government, that's just not an acceptable perspective, given all that we've now learned. Well, what exactly have we learned, Mr. McElrath? But to you, it's not acceptable that the war may have been about issues like states' rights or how much power the federal government should have. An argument which goes all the way back to our founding, 1776, and even before then, with some of these local principalities or governing bodies before you have the 13 colonies. Or as the subject line of a February 2024 History Center email to reporters put it, quote, the Civil War was about slavery. And the word was is in all caps. So there you go. It was all about slavery. It was all about slavery. We're going to spend $87 million to tell you that the Civil War was all about slavery. But we're going to give you an unblemished, hard-nosed look at the Civil War, unbiased, unfiltered, pure Snow White. We have all the answers. North Carolinians, it seems, are still divided on the war's causes. In a 2021 poll of North Carolinians by Elon University, 51% of respondents said they believed the Civil War was, quote unquote, mainly about states' rights, while 49% said it was mainly fought over slavery. Well, I think there was a whole mess of issues in 1861. Oh, I don't know, like Florida worried about protecting their fisheries because the fishing industry in Florida is a vital part of that state's economy. You had members of the banditti that were teaming up with these violent abolitionists, and they were attacking people on the western frontier, and the federal government was turning a blind eye to it because you had a lot of these northern states that hated Southerners, or had these rifts, or there was this rift between the federal government and these homesteaders. It will be 2 years before the museum opens, but teachers around the state are getting a first look at the museum's approach now in a series of two-day symposiums that bring together K through 12 educators with scholars to learn about local Civil War history. At one of these symposiums in October, 20 teachers from Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, Gaston, and Lincoln, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, it's Cabarrus, from these counties gathered in Charlotte to tour a plantation and hear from experts about the war and post-war Reconstruction period in the Piedmont. Barton Myers, professor of history at Washington and Lee University, talked to the teachers about persistent pro-Union sentiment in the Guilford and Randolph counties, spurred by the Confederacy's introduction of a draft in 1862. But here's where things get really interesting, because now they're going to tell you the real story of the Civil War. And this led the group to discuss the experience of Stephanie Whitehead, a pro-Union slaveholder in Pitt County. She attempted to pay her son's way out of the war with money and enslaved people. One son still got drafted and was killed in action. At one point, Myers said Whitehead threatened to shoot Confederate soldiers who came to her plantation seeking food. Now, teachers are debating whether Whitehead was truly anti-Confederacy. Was she anti-Confederate? Or just wanting her son not to go to war? I think it's probably the latter. She didn't want her son going to war. But wait a minute. She's a plantation owner. She's from the North. Yeah, that was very common back in the day. You had a lot of people in the North that invested in Southern plantations, i.e. the Bank of New York. Pardon me. You had a lot of Southern plantation owners who were of Northern birth. You had people in the North who supported slavery. You had people in the South who opposed slavery. You had people in the North who opposed slavery and people in the South who supported slavery. I mean, it was all over the place. Or they supported other issues. Getting long-winded here. But here we have it. We have a pro-union person who happened to be a plantation owner. We have a subheadline here, or section said, it's called The Stories We Tell. The Stories We Tell. It said The Stories We Tell. There you go. So it says here, a nuanced look at history like that is difficult to bring into the classroom, given the time constraints and sensitivities North Carolina teachers face, said McElrath, who is also the experiential learning director at Carey Academy, a private school that teaches grades 6 through 12. North Carolina public school students studied the Civil War and Reconstruction 3 times in the 4th, 8th, and 11th grades. You mean to tell me it takes this amount of time to learn about the Civil War? I mean, hell, you could just sit down and learn about it. If you wanted to really dive deep into the weeds here, I mean, really get into the weeds about this, though, then have at it. Then you can spend hours upon hours upon hours investigating what happened during the Civil War. But generally speaking, you have to rehash this stuff in 4th, 8th, and 11th grade, really? The state sets broad standards for what students should learn across the social studies curriculum in those grades. 8th graders should, quote unquote, understand the role of conflict and cooperation in the development of North Carolina and the nation. That's going to one of the 7 standards for that grade. Now they bring in here, I'm going to skip ahead. They bring in what happened January 6th into the conversation here, into the fold. As though January 6th was caused by the Civil War. Teaching the truth about the Civil War and Reconstruction matters, McElrath said, because so many of the problems that went unresolved in the 1860s and 1870s still plague America today. In the 2021 Elon University poll, nearly two-thirds of respondents said they believed slavery still affects the status of Black Americans either a great deal or a fair amount. To McElrath, images of people carrying a Confederate flag as they stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021 are evidence enough of the Civil War era's ongoing relevance. So the Civil War caused January 6th? Did that Confederate battle flag, did that cause January 6th? I thought January 6th had to deal with the 2020 election. I'm a little confused here, Mr. McElrath. Or maybe he's confused on his history. Quote, that memory has been used as a cudgel to keep certain people down, he said. All the really, really complex interplays between that history and memory deserve more space than we typically have time to give them. That's the hardest thing about teaching this. Quote, we got the best minds in the state and told the truth with all its... If we get the best minds in the state, rather, and told the truth with all its blemishes, that may upset some people. You need to know the truth. We must tell you the truth about what happened during the Civil War. Now, symposium participants, a lot to read here tonight, also cited a dearth of materials on local events and the challenges of taking on the volatile subject matter, given the strong opinions students may bring and the developmental stages that teenagers go through, particularly in the 8th grade. Well, we're covering 50 years of history in about 4 weeks, said Mike Savoia, a third-year teacher at Parkway Middle School in Monroe. Quote, the depth of information in the images, 13 and 14-year-olds don't always understand how to fully take in that and use it for good. But these symposiums, according to McElrath, aim to arm teachers with primary source materials that tell the local and state stories. Focusing on local history and the people who experienced it is a powerful tool for engaging students and their families. Well, I'll agree with that. Because it allows you to get more in tune with the history of the area, understand your background. Like if you move somewhere, you want to find out the history of that area that you moved to. Beyond new tools, the symposiums give educators a forum for talking honestly together about the challenges of teaching painful, politically fraught history. Quote, get comfortable being uncomfortable is a mantra McElrath repeats throughout the 2 days. That's something the teachers steeled themselves to do as the event closed. When the college scholars departed, chairs let me read this again. When, as I said, I'm doing this early Saturday morning on the overnight shift. When the college scholars departed, there you go, chairs that had faced a lectern were moved into a circle so the educators could speak and listen to one another. What is salient to you from the last 2 days, McElrath asked them. Quote, what I want to focus on from this is the origin, said Jocelyn Roundtree, a social studies teacher at Olympic High School in Charlotte. We spend so much time in the classroom doing and making things without knowing why we do them. It's important for students to grasp the why behind the what. And several other teachers reference letters and other primary source documents as tangible ways they carry the symposium with them. But having these primary sources and documents will give us the courage and the confidence to talk about this with our students. So again, it's a lengthy article. Find this over at the Assembly. A proposed museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina, is going to give you the real scoop on the history of the Civil War. And they don't care who they offend to do it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can follow me at Instagram, #JasonComposes, because I write music in my spare time. You go to X, Culture Confederacy, at Culture Confed1 on X. Now you can find me at Substack. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. God bless this thing called the United States. And I better go before I lose my voice here. So I'll catch you next time, and y'all have a great weekend. Take care.